where are your studies?
Yep.
And what are the claims you're making and how are they backed up? Because wearing that, despite being kind of a reformed lawyer, I'm always going to have that legal hat kind of in the back of my mind. The consumer wants to be educated.
Yes.
And I think that's something that Daily Nori has done so well. Like, you're not dumbing anything down for the consumer. You're explaining why the product is different from all the others probiotics that are on the market. Sometimes your competitors, there are still people that they understand there's enough room for everyone to exist. And
Absolutely.
I think female founders could be really great about actually sharing that knowledge and resources. How do you grab the consumer's attention? It's having those, subject lines and those bylines that really claim, like, this is why you should buy our product, this is what it's doing, this is how it's going to make a difference. And you can have all the sorts of kind of like what I would call more fluff marketing, cutesy things, like that's all important and that can be really, really powerful. But at the end of the day, again, the consumer has become more and more sophisticated, and there's so many different products in every category that's on the market. In order to differentiate yourself, we're buying quite a bit of Daily Nori products every month, and it's like I can get all of these products for my family for the same price that I get like one probiotic from these other much more expensive companies that would only serve like one family member for one specific issue. So I think like having that value proposition is really, really important.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. The first guest who has opened the door successfully. Alyson is an advisor to Daily Nori and dear friend, has a terrific background in law and also in tons of consumer. So it's going to be a fun conversation digging into all of your experience.
So I am a recovering lawyer. I went to law school, and at the time I even remember saying, like, I wish I could one day just like be a lawyer to a beauty company.
Wow.
And asking a judge that I was interning for, and she was like, no, that doesn't really exist. I'm like, okay, I'll do it for like medical device companies and this and that. Ended up graduating law school, going to work at a big law firm, did a lot of intellectual property protection, particularly patents. And then from there, got an opportunity to go in-house as general counsel at a public company. It was kind of like the first fast fashion company that existed. 50 years old, California based, Wet Seal for those who are of my vintage and remember that. It no longer is around. And really my first opportunity to transition from kind of like a purely legal role into a business role and take on some more entrepreneurial operational aspects of the business. And then I got the call from a company that I was already a customer of called Drybar, both a retail company in terms of like products for hair, and they also have more than 150 called shops, but salons throughout the US, Canada, and now in the UK. And they just do blowouts. And I decided to make the leap. It was definitely still very much in the startup phase. And I had already discovered at my previous companies, even though they were much bigger, that I really kind of liked that like scrappy startup environment where you have the opportunity to like build something where no one's going to tell you like, this is how it's been done perfectly for the last 20 years. Just keep it moving and do things the same.
Right.
I stayed with the salon division and ultimately ended up being president, running the company.
Awesome.
Keeping it as open as possible.
I was just going to ask you, so what years did you sit as the president?
I left Drybar in 2022, I believe.
So you were there navigating Drybar through COVID.
I was.
What are some of the highlights, lowlights, lessons learned there?
I was not baking bread during COVID, like so many of our fellow Americans.
You didn't get on the sourdough kick?
No, I have never made sourdough bread. I was not discovering Tiger King or any Netflix shows. I have never worked harder in my life, and nor had my team. Even when all of our shops were closed, and like a huge concentration of stores were in California and New York,
Right.
had like multiple shutdowns.
Yeah.
We had over 3,000 stylists,
Wow.
as team members that needed to earn money. We were really proud that we were able to, despite being closed, pay for them and keep people on medical insurance like as long as we possibly could, and then bring back people as quickly as possible. We pivoted. We did online Zoom trainings for a lot of companies that were looking to connect with like some of their high profile female clients who were suddenly like on Zoom all day long as investment bankers, lawyers. So doing trainings and utilizing some of our expert stylists, our founder to do that. They knew they had a really good idea. The head of creative was phenomenal, and he knew what he was doing, and he didn't budge, even when like ops would come in and be like, oh, this is where we can shave money here or there. He was like, no, this is like what we're going to do. So I really learned like just a great respect for the importance of building that brand and a culture too for team members within the company, as well as for the consumer that you're targeting.
And then, so after Drybar, you were there until 2022, is that right?
Yes, and then I got a phenomenal opportunity. I was honestly like a little bit tired just from going through COVID and thought I'd take a little break. But an opportunity kind of once in a lifetime fell in my lap that I couldn't pass up, that really brought together kind of like my entire career history to date. And it was to join a very new company called K18 that had come on the market and created a product, really the first of its kind, that could actually repair damaged keratin. Where K18 really cracked that code, aside from having phenomenal technology that worked, is that it was really consumer friendly. They had this amazing creative team that was so dedicated to not only explaining to the consumer and to the stylist like why this product was efficacious and the efficacy and the technology behind it, but they were developing this brand love and culture that, like Drybar, like they were not going to deviate from, even if that meant slower growth, even if that meant putting out fewer products. Like they always wanted to really stay true, like we're only going to put out products that like there's truly a need for, that truly differentiates.
It's an interesting one because, I mean, kind of like what we're dealing with too in the digestive category and probiotics, it is hard to find incrementality. There's a lot of just Me Too products, hair care. There's a lot of Futures Go and cruise through Sephora. A lot of brands doing the same thing with very similar formulas, and K18 really cut through because of innovation.
The consumer wants to be educated. And I think that's something that Daily Nori has done so well. Like you're not dumbing anything down for the consumer. You're explaining why the product is different from all the others probiotics that are on the market and on the shelf, so that they can make a smart and informed decision. You're showing them what the actual ingredients are. Like you're listing the different strains, so they know that they're actually getting something with the right strains, and the strains that you guys have performed the testing that have efficacy and clinical studies behind them.
Well, and it's interesting you say that. I took a meeting with customer, large, huge multinational customer a couple of years ago, and we had just run an initial study on our capsules. It was an in vitro study that shows that our cap and cap delivers the bacteria more efficiently. And, we're not the biggest company, the most well-funded, but I knew from the very beginning that investing into some of these studies, even if you just start small with the studies and get something that you can then grow from, is so important. And walked into this customer and was talking to the whole buying team. And I thought the night before, I was like, I'm actually going to print the study because, it's the digital world. This was actually like post COVID. So now it's like really digital world. It was actually like very rare that I was at the customer in person. It was one of the only in person meetings from a customer perspective that year. And I feel like I'm back, 5-10 years ago when I was doing this and I was at Kinko's printing this study. And I'm so glad I did because, of course, they're not going to read the study when you're in this meeting. But they said, wow, thank you. This is the first time anyone's brought a study with them and brought a study in here. And I thought, there's no way. Because I know the, competitors that we have in the space, especially the large ones, the Proctors and Gambles, et cetera, they have a lot of research behind their products. There's no doubt about it. But they hadn't led with that, at least with these particular buyers. And from, I think, what's going to happen and really what's going to perform well from a beauty perspective, a hair care perspective, makeup, all of these categories is going to be efficacy. And so I would love to hear your perspective of that, even from like more of the legal lens, right? Because now it's all, it all kind of ties together of what you can say and how you can market well. But how do you think that consumer landscape will change?
I don't know if you remember, but one of the first conversations you and I had about Daily Nori, and I was asking you all about the products and the science and the technology about it. And around it, I asked, like, where are your studies?
Yep.
And what are the claims you're making? And how are they backed up? Because wearing that, despite being kind of a reformed lawyer, I'm always going to have that legal hat kind of in the back of my mind. And I was so impressed that, like, you've really made an investment in doing all of these studies and ensuring that all of the consumer marketing and claims that the company is making are 100% backed up by the studies you're doing. You're not just looking to put out a product that fills the shelves. Like, you really want to differentiate and be able to educate the consumer. And I really think that's across the board where the industry is going. Whether it's in the, probiotics, nutritional wellness space, those companies like Nori, like K18, that are actually going out there and leading with those studies to the consumer and explaining to the consumer, like, this is our product, you should buy it because this is like the actual hard science behind it.
Yeah.
And this is why it works. And we've invested in good technology. We've invested in studies, independent third-party studies that support that technology. And then we're going to invest in our marketing team to educate you, the consumer, so that you don't have to be the doctor, you don't have to be the biochemist to understand how this is going to be beneficial.
When you're talking and you're in these discussions with the Unilevers of the world, I'll just say, right, but the big CPG companies, the ones that have the most market share, outside of, obviously, we all know gross revenue, EBITDA, profitability, what are some of the things that you think any consumer brand needs to have if they are looking long term to partner with a big CPG company or big strategic, or if they're just looking to attract capital?
One thing I think they're looking into is the uniqueness of the product or the service that you're offering. And particularly when it comes to products, they want to understand, like, what kind of intellectual property protection you have for that, whether that's a patent, whether that's a trademark or a trade secret. Like, have you created something that's truly novel in the market? And is it going to fulfill a consumer need? And are you able to really build a moat around that to prevent competitors from just knocking off your product and taking all of the, R&D that you invested to create that and stealing it and making, a cheaper version or a similar version. So they want to know that you have something that's protectable. And then I think also just, the brand. How have you gone about, building a brand that consumers trust, that consumers feel like they're getting value? I think that's something, like, especially too, that really impressed me with Daily Nori. Like, we all know that there are different probiotic companies on the market. We've seen them on, like, our social media feeds, and maybe they have a decent product, but they want to charge you like $80 or $100 a month. And again, we all have like a limited amount of spend that we can spend on everything under the sun, and that starts to get to be like a very expensive proposition, especially if you want to take like probiotics for various different types of things that you're looking to target in your own system. And so I think like the price point of Nori, of having like the technology of like the capsule and capsule technology, One of my favorite things is the flavoring of the gel cap that I think every single pill should have under the sun. If
Once you get used to it, it's really hard to go back.
Yes, it tastes like an orange, and not
Yeah.
like a gross orange like a vitamin C like chewable usually does, but like a real fresh citrusy
Yeah.
orange. So I don't want to gag when I'm like swallowing it. It's like almost like a little candy in the morning or at night. I personally, for my family, I'm buying the women's hormone balance that
Yep.
I take for myself. My young adult daughter is taking that too. We both have noticed that it's really like helped our skin.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, a really good overall for women.
Yep.
We're both also taking the digestive aid
Yeah.
daily. So the two of us, like, that's, you know, 2 different products every single month. My husband's a physician and he's a cardiologist. So like fitness and health are really, really important to him. Certainly he's aware of and, you know, will prescribe at times to his patients where appropriate all of these new pharmaceutical weight loss
GLP-1s.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Ozempics of the world. But he doesn't qualify for that. I mean, he has 10 pounds. He doesn't
Yeah.
have 100 pounds to lose, and there's all sorts of side effects
That's
with
right.
that. So he's started taking the Feel Full probiotic supplement that you just add to your water, and he's noticed a difference
It's great. It's a brand new
with
product.
it. And he actually told me that he's had a couple of patients that like are severely overweight enough that they actually do qualify for
Right.
some of these other, you know, prescription pharmaceuticals, but because of like the very long list of real side effects
Yeah.
that come along with them, they've asked him for alternatives, and he's been
Yeah.
able to tell them, like from personal experience, well, this is what I'm
Yeah.
taking, and you can order it on Amazon, and it's often cheaper than like your prescription copay would be for
That's
these
right.
very, very expensive drugs, and there's no side effects. We're buying quite a bit of Daily Nori products every month, and it's like I can get all of these products for my family for the same price that I'd get like one probiotic from these other much more
That's right.
expensive companies that would only serve like one family member for one specific issue.
Right.
So I think like having that value proposition is really, really important.
I had a vision that was, and it's still the same exact vision for the brand, which is how do you become the family brand, right? This category is not going anywhere. Digestive health is becoming more of an issue, not less. And then it is a rare category that we're just at the tip of the iceberg of research. So things like the stress product, for example, and cortisol, we're just learning about that. How the gut impacts your hormones, we're just learning about that. Like we're really, really early with this category in the microbiome. And we'll be learning for our entire lifetime about these different bacteria, the importance of it. Now, obviously, there's this huge basis of research that's incredibly strong and getting stronger by the day around metabolic health and weight health in the gut. And so it just keeps, frankly, getting better as far as like the reason why personally I decided to be a part of this category, but also the reason our brand exists. It's interesting to hear your perspective, you know, because we love our lawyers. We work with our lawyers very closely, our FDA, FTC lawyers. And obviously the lawyers, you know, when they go through our stuff, I always have them kind of highlight, right? Green, yellow, red, right? And so there's always a level of risk that you have to take, right? It's never perfect. We're a smaller company, so we have a little bit more appetite for risk. We never do anything that's too risky, but we also can't be so careful that we don't do anything, right? And there's kind of a concern there. So I think, you know, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective, particularly to a young startup, like a young, you know, early startup that's not doesn't necessarily have any target on their back. How would you think about what's some practical advice you could give them to try and navigate not only just like packaging development and product development legally, but also like navigating the world of TikTok legally, which is becoming harder and harder every day at what can we say and how do we say it?
Any industry, there's going to be like those very bright line rules that you need to educate yourself, whether that's through engaging a lawyer or, you know, nowadays there are a lot of resources that are at the consumers, you know, and the founders' fingertips.
True.
Just through AI, through networking.
ChatGPT and Grok.
Through networking and talking with other founders and going to programs and things like that to make sure you understand like what if there's any, you know, actual government regulations that are governing your product, your services, because those, you know, you can't break those rules at all. You can't take risks. You can't end up in jail. When you're looking at things that have to do with consumer safety, I would
Yes.
say like you absolutely can never take that risk. It's not ethical.
Yeah. Safety and quality is like the one thing that's like you do not mess around with.
Absolutely. Ever. If you have even like the slightest issue, that's the quickest way to lose that consumer confidence. And it's with anything in life, like it's takes a long time to earn trust. It takes a second to lose it. So I think, finding that right balance, but then feeling like that freedom to be creative, to run those funny, spoofs, to go out there. So like a really good example is we just had the Olympics over the summer. The International Olympic Committee is like incredibly strict and buttoned up about how you can, unless you're an official sponsor and going through their various rules or working with their various athletes in a specific approved way, you cannot do anything Olympic related. And it doesn't matter how small of a company or an influencer you are, they will find you. So don't do something stupid, like that. Be really careful about, showing that celebrities are endorsing your brand if they're not.
And that's the thing that we're seeing a lot of social media right now is even using influencer content and reposting it, right? And then stitching in whatever commentary or whatever on it. And it's sometimes you can do that, get away with it, and it works, right? And a lot of times if you're advertising to a similar audience, that audience recognizes that person and then kind of just assumes that they're with your brand when they very well may not be.
You really have to kind of balance that. I would say, definitely anything regulatory, make sure you are very informed, and when in doubt, hire lawyers. It's not that you have to go and be hiring lawyers for everything under the sun, and it's also joining those like industry groups and networking groups, because they'll have a lot of free advice. They'll have mentors, companies that, sometimes your competitors, there are still people that they understand there's enough room for everyone to exist. And
absolutely,
I think female founders can be really great about actually sharing that knowledge and resources.
And just, practical resources for things like brand names is Tess, right? The trademark search. I've used that a ton, just even with friends that text me with different ideas for names of things or whatever. There's a ton of resources, to your point, at your fingertips right now, even before you call a lawyer. So I think that the biggest things that we've found that have been helpful have been industry groups. And a lot of these industry groups too now are like incredibly vocal on LinkedIn, and they post all these things, and you can go to a trade show or two. I know when I was starting, because probiotics and because supplements, but mostly because probiotics was new to me, we had worked on probiotics in food and bev, but I hadn't just purely been in probiotics before. I spent a lot of time at this like smaller conference, but it's highly productive, highly specialized conference called Probiota that brought in all these researchers, and most of it was research that goes over most people's heads in the room, including mine. It was very, very technical research, a lot of it, and a lot of that will never come to market. But then there's another angle of it that was just, it's the right type of, professional group and trade group. So that's great advice. And then the other thing with packaging too that we've learned is everything, you should have all of your packaging go through FDA, FTC lawyers. Obviously, when you're starting out, it might be expensive, but I did have a question for you, because this is something, and this might be kind of, more kind of dietary supplement focused, but I'm sure the same thing happens in hair care, skincare, makeup. When you're looking at a formula, you've created a formula, let's say, that's unique, and it's, something that maybe you're going to run a clinical study around, which is very now, I would say, popular in a great way, but it's gaining a lot of momentum in the dietary supplement routes. What would you consider when you look at the difference between a trade secret and a patent, and the kind of the pros and the cons of going the patent route with a supplement?
A patent is something, you're getting protection for it. It's country specific. There are a number of rules to getting a patent. Not only does it have to be different and non-obvious, and not just like a slightly obvious addition to something that's already out there, what they call the prior art that already exists in the public domain, but you can't have had your product, your invention, your formula out there and in the public for more than a year and
Okay.
still get a patent. So you can't like have something, you're doing innovation, you're selling maybe direct to consumer in a smaller way for 3 or 4 years, and suddenly you get the funding to hire the big lawyers, and then
Yeah.
you file a patent. Like you missed, it's a 1 year on sale bar. So there's a lot of rules around that. And then there's a limited shelf life for a patent. You don't get to keep a patent forever. At a certain point, it is going to expire. So, for example, like Coca-Cola, a well-known brand with their formula, they never patented the formula because otherwise it would be able, it would expire and people could have the exact same formula. You're really putting out there and telling everyone in
What's
the
in it.
public domain
Yeah.
what's in it the exact way. So it's really a balance. A lot of times you will find that people will obtain like a patent on the formula itself because so much nowadays can be reverse engineered.
Right.
That if you're just doing a trade secret, like you really don't have that protection other than that your employees, anyone contractually obligated to maintain the confidentiality of that trade secret, cannot go out there and sell it or share it with others. But the general public, a competitor, they can reverse engineer, they can run their own tests to try to figure it out or get it very, very close.
You could have a patent, and that obviously, when you patent something, everyone knows, right? It's public domain, the formula of it, but you have it protected for a certain amount of time. But if you're still processing it in some unique way, you can still have the protection around how you're processing it.
Correct. So you'd have a patent on the composition.
Yep.
Formula.
Yep.
But you may have that the process of making it is unique, and you may decide to you can patent that too. There are method patents for manufacturing and things, but you may choose depending on your unique circumstances, the industry, what you think is possible for someone to kind of figure out or reverse engineer to keep that a trade secret or to patent it.
Yep, it's super helpful, and I think that the more complex and, which is a good thing, innovative that the dietary supplement world gets, the more we're going to see more and more of that. That's what the trend is going towards that. Did you have any experience with clinical trials, running clinical trials? I mean, what's your feedback on that right now? How important do you think that is from a purely legal perspective?
Absolutely. I would say from a legal and a branding, you're going to be very, very limited in the types of claims you can make to the consumer without having third-party independent clinical studies to back it up. And the consumer, how do you grab the consumer's attention? It's having those, subject lines and those bylines that really claim like this is why you should buy our product, this is what it's doing, this is how it's going to make a difference. And you can have all the sorts of kind of like what I would call more fluff marketing, cutesy things, like that's all important and that can be really, really powerful. But at the end of the day, again, the consumer has become more and more sophisticated, and there's so many different products in every category that's on the market. In order to differentiate yourself, you're going to need that. And to use your example, when you went into a well-known retailer to talk to them about starting to carry your product, the fact that you came in with printed copies of the clinicals really differentiated from probably the 20 people that were behind you in line for those market meetings, tried to get their products on the shelves as well. And, going back a little bit, you talked about risk.
Yeah.
I think it's like you have to have a risk tolerance to be a founder, like you said. Like
kind of goes with the territory.
You've got to have like a little bit of, you've got to be a dreamer, you've got to have a little bit of bravado, you've got to be willing to sometimes fail, even good
a lot.
Ideas
you've got to fail. You got to be ready to fail every day. It's just little failures. Most days are mostly little failures, but you have to be ready to fail big time. It just goes with it. It's not going to go perfect.
But there's like the risk that's just inherent in launching a new company, a new brand, and new products. And that's very different from legal risk. And I think like that's where you've been able to really like still being a startup, but have like a major impact and have a presence in these really established, reputable retailers that the products are carried in. Because while you've taken risk to like go to market and launch really innovative products and to get things out there quicker and faster, you've never cut corners, like you said, when it comes to product safety, product quality, product efficacy and the claims and that you're making related to that, and following all of the different regulatory and legal rules around that. And so it's like, take those big bold risks when it comes to like investing in more inventory. You know, you weren't penny wise and pound foolish when you decided to do, you know, the capsule and capsule technology that you knew, you know, would make a huge difference. It's why, like, prior to Nori, like, I've never been able to stay with vitamins or supplements or probiotics because they just were so upsetting to my stomach. And I had like enough, you know, pills that I like maybe had to take, prescription pills. That, like, to add something that was like wellness but wasn't going to like immediately cure, you know, whatever I needed. I couldn't sustain it for long. Or, you know, like you said, it takes 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks to like really start to notice like profound differences in health. It's like when you start a diet, like you start eating healthy, and you know, the first couple of weeks, like you know, that fat starts to turn to muscle, but you might not actually see a change on the scale.
That's right.
And all of a sudden, like at the 2-month, 3-month part, you're like, oh my gosh, like I've actually lost like really noticeable weight. I've lost inches. I feel better. I have more energy. And so also, like, by having that price proposition that's accessible to the consumer, you know, they're able to stick with it and have the ability to continue to take it until they're really noticing that change.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too is just with these brands, you know, there's this kind of spirit in the, you know, consumer brand space, and it's really supplement space too, that's been so focused on marketing and digital marketing. It's why supplements, I think, get a really bad rap. They get a really bad rap because everyone knows, retailers included, that you've got and you can create a supplement that can have potentially really good margin, right? It's one of these categories. It's different than lettuce, right? That has a short shelf life, small margin. This is a category that people know you can make money with and that there's a big margin. But these things that we're talking about, these efficacy and the quality, it's happening fast, but it's also never something that happens overnight. So it's something that we're working on. We're definitely going to, keep working on, but just as kind of another word of advice, and it's encouragement to myself, but to all the other brands too. It's rare that something, grows and then sells or something within 5 years. Most consumer brands, especially those that are doing all this work, I mean, it takes sometimes decades, right? It can take a long time.
So, like, going back to K18, where, we had an exit within 3 years of product launch. It was really,
and this
like
is rare.
This quickest exit in beauty, and really successful. But the founder and, other third-party researchers that the company had partnered with spent more than a decade before a product was ever launched, a company was ever started, a brand created, researching everything there was to know about hair and the structure of hair, and trial and error with different amino acid chains to create the unique peptide that formed the foundation of K18's first product. And his first novel peptide. So yes, the brand itself had like astronomical quick timeline of growth, but it wasn't without like a decade of really methodical thought, research, investment, blood, sweat, and tears by the founders and, a team of people that they were partnering with to really invest in that technology and have something that was then worthy to put in a product. Keep taking risks, keep creating amazing products, and if anyone's following this series and they have not gone out and gotten Daily Nori, like, I literally would not say this if I was not a user myself. This is the only vitamin supplement probiotic that I have ever been able to use with any kind of consistency. And the fact that like every member of my family's on it and on a couple of different ones, and we're seeing a difference. I'm appreciative that there's a product out there.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Helping us to be healthy. So thank
you so much. Awesome.
Thanks.